The islands of the Caribbean, lush and brimming with diverse life. Yet these very lives and livelihoods are threatened by increasingly severe climate change impacts, a crisis the people of the Caribbean did not cause. The first Global Stocktake, completed in 2023, is a tool to help course correct on this crisis. The GST is a critical tool within the Paris Agreement to address these impacts, to identify what needs to be done to curb these effects and support those who need it most, to help make systemic change so we can limit global warming to a 1.5 degrees Celsius increase above pre-industrial levels. Leading science body, the IPCC, has noted that above a 1.5 degrees Celsius increase, high and very high climate risks will become the new normal. Many of these will be irreversible.
1.5 degrees Celsius was one of the red lines that small island developing states, in particular the Caribbean delegation, went into COP21 with. We were very prepared, and we went in with a list of items that we absolutely needed to see in the Paris Agreement.
Within the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, essential work is being done.
The GST is essentially a two-track process. It is running along a technical track where we look at what the gaps are, we specify where those gaps are, we look for solutions, we look at best practices, we try to understand what are the barriers to implementation, what are the enablers, we try to understand how we can scale the best practices. And then you have the political track where governments come into play, heads of state come into play to basically answer the question, so what next? So what now? We know where the gaps are. What are you going to do about it?
In our islands, innovative women, men, and young people are working to safeguard their future and build resilience.
Brasso Seco has a history of cultivation of cocoa, and it is deeply entrenched in the culture also. It was part of many people's lives, growing up on these estates and cultivating cocoa and so forth. And there was a high amount of production, and there was a great demand at a point in time. There has been a resurgence in the cocoa and chocolate industry. And there's something positive about it, which is that it's important for a country to be able to produce things to feed itself.
The reason why we decided to make chocolate, because we have plenty of people here, especially young ladies who are unemployed, young males. That's why we don't make cacao anymore. They get paid to make the cacao, So these are the people that we hire, because look at the logistics of trying to get out here to go for a job with a high school diploma. For me, I just doing the best that I can while I'm here. And I think if all of us could do whatever we can, no matter how small it is, it will make a difference.
Brasso Seco Paria was originally a cocoa and coffee estate community where long ago, our grandparents and parents would have lived off the land. But currently, farmers are more planting citrus, bananas, Christophine. Those are three of the main crops that are planted in Brasso presently. In Brasso here, they don't add chemicals to those products that they're making. It's all natural. It's just 100% the beans, nothing added, nothing taken out.
As a farmer, I grow mainly crops that do well in this area. I observe what does well and what doesn't do well, and I try to grow the crops that do the best. The common way of doing things right now is very destructive, very monocrop oriented, and it produces food at the expense of the environment. And I try in my approach to produce high quality food in the most productive way and system possible while maintaining the greatest diversity of the natural environment in the farm that I cultivate.
Brasso Seco Paria are seeing signs of climate change in the community in terms of water flow in the rivers. It's decreasing. It's not powerful as before, and persons in the community are being affected due to the supply not reaching into their homes to use, whether it's to cook, wash, bathe. It's not reaching in their homes, as well as farmers. They're not getting the flow of water enough to water their crops and so. If we don't make serious changes now to climate change, in the coming years, and it's already happening, we're going to be in trouble. And when I say that, you're already seeing the coastlines going away. You're already seeing the rivers drying. They don't have the volumes of water. So if we continue in the direction we're heading with not putting climate change to the forefront, we're going to be in trouble.
Well, what I would like to see, or what I think is important, is that people change their relationships with others or the environment to something like a family, where you don't have to think about helping the other person or doing what is right. You just do it because it's what needs to be done.
Agriculture is extremely important to every single Caribbean country. Even those countries that have not traditionally had robust agricultural sectors still have agriculture either as a subsistence activity or something that is used to keep some of their rural communities going with income through the markets, etc. Agriculture is one of those sectors that will be impacted very significantly by climate change. The extreme heat that we're experiencing right now, that is making it very difficult for many crops to thrive. They might be surviving, but to thrive. So your yields are going down because of the extreme heat that you're experiencing.
For the Caribbean, we are resilient people because we have this, I think, spirit of bouncing back. However, the spirit it's being challenged quite often because now there is no typical dry and rainy season anymore. It's completely different. The pests and diseases that we're seeing in the agricultural sector are completely different. So how do we change that? We inform our farmers of the varieties that are perhaps drought tolerant or climate resilient varieties. You see certain aspects of climate change like the sargassum on our coastlines. What do? You educate farmers like we can use that sargassum on our fields as a biofertilizer actually. So in a sense, yes, this is the effect of climate change, but how do we, in a sense, use it to our own advantage?
I have experienced climate change as a farmer through floods. And when we get a flood, we lost every crop. We have to start over, and starting over is a difficult time. It's a lot of investing. We invest and we might lose our crops again.
Helen's Daughters was really born out of the fact that, again, I came from farming families on both sides. And I just realized that we're really not doing much at a grassroots level in terms of food security in the Caribbean. And also informing and educating our farmer populations about climate resilience, particularly. And then the gendered perspective of Helen's Daughters come from a personal standpoint because my grandmother was a matriarch, and like so many women in agriculture, was very much under acknowledged and under supported. So we created what's really a community, not just of training and capacity development, but a community of building resilience, not just for food security, but adapting and being resilient to climate change. 60% of women in agriculture, in the labor force, are women, agricultural labor force are women. So it's important to actually provide the benefits and the support mechanisms for these women. So we work in four particular pillars. The first one is market access, providing markets to female farmers that perhaps they would not have access to before. The second is capacity development and training. We know that agricultural education is difficult to get to, particularly after you've left school. And I'm a classic example of that. So what we do, we create free or low-cost agricultural education for women, young ladies who are interested in that. The other two are, one, psychosocial support. So for our women, they go through a number of issues, whether it's domestic abuse, child sexual abuse, trauma. There are so many things that also affect the productivity of women within the communities that we work with. And finally, my favorite part is redefining what a woman in agriculture is and looks like. I think for far too long, women in agriculture have been, as I've said, under-acknowledged and under-supported because they think that they're vendors, that they just sell, they don't grow. And that's actually a lie.
Atlas is a non-profit and non-governmental organization which was built to help assist the youth in Choiseul. And very often we've been mistaken for just embarking on journeys in the environmental field, but that's not just what we do. We try to foster the talents and the experiences of the youth so that they could stay off the streets and give them a positive avenue. Community work has always been something that I've been passionate about. And I believe that it stemmed from being part of a long line of teachers and individuals who are very passionate about their community and are very involved in community work. So I think that I got into this because it's part of who I am. It's something that's in my blood. I need to assist individuals. So one of the biggest projects that we embarked on was the rainwater harvesting systems in the areas of Lamaze, Monzi, Choiseul. We remembered that the areas of Lamaze and Monzi are plagued with this century-old issue of water shortages in the area, just like most communities in St. Lucia. So they get water maybe once or twice a week for about 30 minutes, and we wanted to assist. So what we did was we provided rainwater harvesting systems inclusive of water tanks and other fixtures and plumbing material.
If you have the rainwater in the tank from Atlas, you can wash, you can bathe, you can clean, whatever you have to do. Water is very, very important. And if you cannot get water to cook, wash, bathe, or do anything, you are in serious problem. So it was a bit difficult for a lot of us in this community before. But since Atlas came and gave out tanks to the people, it has been a blessing.
I believe that the youth should be involved in discussions surrounding climate change and the climate as a whole. Because let's be honest, the youth makes up the majority of the population. And if we're not going to do it, then who will?
If we don't get that temperature curve to bend back down towards 1.5 degrees Celsius, then there probably is no amount of finance that will help us adapt to the impacts that will unleash on us. Right now, we're experiencing one of the hottest years. In fact, we believe that when this is over, this probably will be the hottest year since we started measuring these temperatures. So it's extremely important for us to assess where we are right now as a global community and see what we need to do urgently so that we can keep 1.5 degrees Celsius within sight, but also all of the other things that need to be done to ensure that the goals of the Paris Agreement, that we are faithful to those goals.
According to the IPCC, with increased temperature, sea levels will continue to rise in small island regions, including the Caribbean. This will result in increased coastal flooding. Sea level rise will also cause shorelines to retreat for most small islands. Protecting coastal assets using hard and soft measures must be a priority in development planning.
In Trinidad and Tobago, we respond a lot to whatever disaster happens. We're reactive. And one of the great things about this project is it's preparing beforehand. We're being proactive about this issue of climate change. We haven't yet lost a heritage site completely to, the flooding and the disasters that we see happening, but introducing this use of technology and flood modeling and trying to predict what will happen, we're hoping to be able to plan for this uncertain future. The Resilient Heritage Trinidad and Tobago project is a partnership project. It's in partnership with the University of Florida Historic Preservation Program, the Craig Group. It's funded by the U.S. Ambassador's Fund for Cultural Preservation through the U.S. Embassy in Port of Spain. And the first step, I would say, was documenting and understanding the conditions of the sites. So documentation and condition analysis. From there, we're able to use the sea level rise data that we have and other climate change data that we have to do modeling so that we could understand what might happen to some of these sites. So for example, we utilize like a bathtub model where we just simply had a 3D model of the heritage site, for example, PTSC, and we just raised the water level to what would be the predicted sea level rise levels. The real issue we came across with is what would people be affected? So we chose the downtown Port of Spain, which is a very, busy hub where lots of people pass through every day and will be affected. So we chose those 3 downtown sites as pilot sites. So this is called the St. Vincent Jetty Lighthouse, but there's no jetty here and we're in downtown Port of Spain. Why is it called that?
Because at the time of the construction, the lighthouse was actually constructed in the sea. So all of this area was sea all the way going up to Marine Square, Independence Square now. And so it's a 120-foot long jetty that really extended out to the sea here and facilitated, there was a mole that facilitated the berthing of boats that would have cargo and passengers and so on here.
Right, so 1845 is when this land reclamation happened and the lighthouse became landlocked?
Yes, it was. The second phase of the land reclamation started 1845 and it went just up to St. Vincent Street area.
Wow, it's a lot of reclaimed land.
Yep. And as the old people say, the sea will reclaim the land, and I guess that's what we're seeing happening now on the whole challenge with sea level rise and so.
Yes, so we really need to try and preserve them. And with this uncertain future of climate change, the ocean right there, and the ocean used to be here, what's going to happen in the wake of sea level rise?
Yeah, we run the risk of losing these valuable heritage properties, yes.
The National Trust has been doing so much good work in getting people introduced to heritage sites, but not just the site, the history behind it, the link to a community, the link to different people, their traditions, their life ways. So really, people who engage the trust and engage that history, I would say get a new appreciation for Trinidad and Tobago. Success for this project looks like influence and awareness. So getting people aware that heritage needs to be treated a little bit differently, to understand that that is a gap and a shortfall in some of the policies that we have. And by introducing cultural heritage to a lot of our planning and policies, we will be able to help build a more resilient society for climate change.
Oh, Dominica, the land of beauty, the land of verdure and glorious sunshine. Our hills and rivers are viewed with envy by those who stay here, even for a while.
Here are so long, so green and beautiful, as we sing of your Agutis, Cicero, and Manikou.
Of the mountains, valleys, rivers, flowers.
So the plan was 6 months in the forest, living off the land and filming the experience. We're about to go figure out how to self-actualize, find out where man went wrong. And yeah, day 1 out of 183. And then, of course, halfway through, 3 months through, Hurricane Maria basically ended up hitting. Now, someone who had an idea of where I was from, that was in that valley, found me and came to tell me that a category 1 or 2 hurricane was coming. Part of the whole project was thinking about the relationship with nature. And up until that point, I would say it had been fairly, of course there were challenges, but had been fairly good to me. And so I was thinking, all right, this is the kind of thing that our ancestors would have faced over and over again. It doesn't make sense to leave just because this is coming. So I wasn't particularly thinking about climate change when I was sitting waiting for the hurricane to come. But I was thinking about climate change and our impact on the environment throughout sort of the time while I was in the forest. At a moment like that, it's funny, you're just very much thinking about the present, about survival. So immediately after, like crawling out from under the rubble, I was, I think, in shock. I think I cried just seeing what I saw, because I'd spent the last 3 months basically under the forest canopy. And when you crawled out, there's no forest canopy. There's not even a leaf. And I'm not exaggerating. There was not a leaf left on a tree.
You went to bed, all the trees have leaves. You wake up in the morning, there's no leaves. So you can imagine how 14-year-old me felt seeing that for the first time ever. Everywhere is naked, and you really felt the nakedness of the island.
I expected what I saw based on what I was hearing during the night. Total devastation. Total devastation. And I said to myself, well, we're ground zero. Let's tie our belts and let's get back. Let's rebound.
I don't wish to ever have that experience again, but, it stays with you and it makes you really conscious as to, the power and beauty of nature, really.
As soon as Maria was, as soon as it disappeared, then we sprang into action because we knew exactly what we're supposed to do as people to survive. We did not have, running water in the pipes, but we knew, of course, where our spring was. We did not have, gas for cylinders, but we knew how to light a fire.
It was interesting to see traditional foods, things like smoked meats and salted fish. All of a sudden, they made sense a little bit more when you don't have electricity to refrigerate everything. Then all of a sudden, yes, you can store these things, and I don't know, certain things just clicked. And then so many people still have the knowledge of how to essentially make charcoal or smoke food or do any of these things. So I think Dominica is and was uniquely positioned to survive an event like Hurricane Maria in a way that a lot of places couldn't.
And in some ways it's interesting, we're seen as maybe a less developed island. And I think in many ways it is that quote unquote lack of development that is, as I like to say, puts us ahead of the curve. Especially if you think of things being sort of circular, when these events happen, all of a sudden we're ahead. And I think some of those things that uniquely position us are everyone still has a relationship with the land, an understanding of it, often has their own garden. And when I say a garden as in a small plot, a small farm, essentially, where you grow food. We also still have, Dominica is especially blessed with fresh water. And so access to water was not an issue. We have rivers to bathe in, and then we still have all these natural springs where even in non-post-hurricane times, a lot of people would prefer to go and collect their water from there. You've got tight communities. A lot of villages have families that have been there for a long time, and everyone's interconnected. Everyone knows who has what, and kind of it's going back to like a barter trade system. Why don't people do more, I think, is a really complicated question, but also in many ways a simple question. I think that so many of us have to spend so much time and energy on just surviving that there's no time to think about these larger issues. And even if you were to think about them, what can you really do about them? I can imagine that these storms get worse, and maybe in the future Dominica is a place that they have to abandon and evacuate. Realistically, for a lot of people, what it's going to mean is that they'll have to leave home. It's going to be an exodus of like biblical proportions. And I think it's everyone's problem, because if we all have to leave the Caribbean, that means we've got to go to some other country. And we won't even particularly want to be there. They won't particularly want us there. The reality is that everything is interconnected. And what I do is going to affect my neighbor, and what the next country does affects us, and what we do affects them. So I think in reality, we need to understand that sort of interconnected nature of everything and realize that, just because you're okay for now does not mean that you're going to remain okay. If everyone around you is not okay, chances are you're not going to be okay.
I used to hear about sea level rise, and that really didn't mean anything to me or my colleagues. We figured that was something that we didn't have to worry about. We used to fish on stones and rocks. After a while, we couldn't find those rocks because the sea had submerged them. And then you come into this era where we have Category 5 hurricanes. We never knew that before. And things are getting worse.
We Planet Inc. is a nonprofit social enterprise that aims to raise eco-consciousness among citizens in the Caribbean. So we develop innovative incentive-based solutions targeting environmental issues and promoting that eco-consciousness. One of those solutions is our We Planet app that rewards people for living an eco-friendly lifestyle. The youth being part of the solution creates that sustainability that we always speak of. It doesn't make sense for the older generations to come up with a solution and the youth play no part. That means there's no sustainability there, because what happens when they're gone? But if you have the youth of today, and I always say the leaders of today, be a part of creating those solutions, you have what we call sustainability. And I think that's the main thing when it comes to tackling climate issues. You often don't find sustainable solutions. I think that's what the youth offer to big change discussions, big impact discussions. We just tell it as it is. As with little children, you can go to a little child and they'll tell you as it is with no shame. And I think that is what the youth are bringing to this conversation. We're not so easily changed by big ticket conversations or big words. How we feel it is how we say it. And I think that's very important in tackling these big issues. There are world leaders making lots of decisions. Who's holding them accountable? And I think us as young people, we have a role in making sure that the decisions being made, that the people who are part of making these decisions are held accountable for those decisions that affects us ultimately and our future. I think the disaster brought a piece of that community back into our culture, because I think it's so easy for us to get divided, but it's something about facing the same storm that brings people together.
Well, yeah, I believe that the change in climate, of course, is has affected us in terms of the drying up of our rivers. You could see that the rain is not really like it's supposed to be. You have the sun is getting hotter every day because you could feel the impact, of course, because when we plant, our plants are dying because during the rainy season, that is the time we plant, and sometimes during the rainy season there is no rain, and there's hot sun, and during the sun time you expect to get sun, then you have a flood. So it is really affecting us, and we have to learn to adapt to it. But it is affecting us. It is affecting us. Everything was based around development. Development has come with a big cost, a huge cost, and it is costing us our lives today.
I believe the indigenous knowledge can contribute to addressing the climate crisis that we are currently facing. We hold this knowledge to combat deforestation. We hold all this knowledge that we're supposed to be embracing, for example, planting trees based on the moon or based on a particular season. All this knowledge can be used. It will prevent overfishing in our seas and rivers. It will, if we relied more to our traditional ways of farming, will help reduce chemical pollutions in our rivers and our soils. However, I think the knowledge aspect of the indigenous people is one way that if we look at it or put it under a microscope, we'll be able to find all these various solutions to address all these issues that is found within the climate crisis. There are efforts to, let's say, decentralize the knowledge that we have in order to build back stronger and more resilient. However, there are not the right measures in place that would allow the smooth transition of knowledge from the Kalinago people to the outside world. Because the Kalinago knowledge and traditions, it's not something that's fully embraced worldwide. I'm talking from a global perspective. We see indigenous people as, based on the history, savages. We see them as cannibals, and I think it's all the mentality that's surrounded by such history that prevents outsiders to fully embrace these traditions because of trust. That's where we have an issue. Trusting in the knowledge and contributions of Kalinago people in order for you to build back stronger and better and to limit the impact that countries get in terms of natural disasters and also the climate crisis. I think unity is very important when it comes to the global stocktake. Unity, if we are united, then we'll be able to be our brothers' keepers and be able to embrace each other and say, you know what, if you're trying to accomplish that, what are your weaknesses? I can do that. Let's collaborate. Let's see how I can help you to do that. Then we will move on to that goal together.
Loss and damage is important because it covers those things that you cannot adapt to. When your oceans are being forced to absorb more carbon dioxide and they are becoming acidic, and you're now losing your fishery, you're now losing your coral reefs, the same things that the tourists come to dive so that they can look at, and many of them come hoping that they can see Nemo on our reefs, and you can't see Nemo on a dead reef, then the Caribbean becomes a lot less attractive to them. Our fishers, their catch is being diminished. You can't, an acidic ocean, there's nothing you could do to adapt to an acidic ocean. It's not like you have an upset stomach and you could take tons of some of the antacid, you can't throw tons into the ocean.
Caribbean people are spearheading solutions to ensure our region not just survives, but thrives. However, we cannot do it alone. The support of the international community is imperative to bridge the gaps. This is why a strong global stocktake outcome was so critical.
Hi, my name is Ruana Haynes and I'm the Director of Climate Analytics Caribbean. We just concluded COP28 in Dubai with the adoption of the final agreements on the first global stocktake. So what does it mean for the Caribbean? The decision reaffirms global solidarity with the plight of small island developing states for us to stay within the 1.5 degrees warming limit. This decision, all parties to the Paris Agreement have reaffirmed commitment to seeing that 1.5 degrees Celsius warming kept within reach. And how did they do that? Essentially, the pledges for climate action that parties make once they sign up to the Paris Agreement. Under the GST, we noted all of the gaps in implementation that have existed since the Paris Agreement came into force in 2016. And through parties' NDCs, they have now promised to try to close and bridge those gaps. The key in order to give us a fighting chance of staying within that 1.5 degrees Celsius limit. Parties under the Global Stocktake outcome have essentially agreed to strengthen their nationally determined contributions, to revisit the existing nationally determined contributions in order to ramp up climate action within this critical decade, which is what the IPCC tells us is absolutely needed if we want to stay within a 1.5 degrees Celsius limit. We have now a suite of unprecedented measures in relation to the energy sector that have been agreed for the very first time at a COP relating to phasing out methane, phasing out inefficient fossil fuel subsidies, and transitioning away from the use of fossil fuels, all in line with the principles of the Paris Agreement.